All right, very good morning, everyone. I hope you're all excited after the mid-sem is done now. And now we are ready to do some projects from today onwards. So in today's lecture, I'm first going to give you very briefly at least some example for proteomics applications, how you can utilize proteomic technologies to perform some applications. And of course, then you are going to make two groups in the class, and we are going to have one group in a different Teams link and another group in different team links to do the project activity. More detail about this I'm going to talk in some time in subsequent slides. But briefly, I'm going to first give you some flavor that how we utilize proteomics in our own research, right? Because based on all the learning from these technologies and these instruments, finally you want to generate some data and data of good quality, which can address some important biological questions. So in my lab, one of the major projects is on the infectious disease area. And I'm going to give you some flavor very briefly about a project on malaria proteomics, right? So to investigate the problem of malaria. But if you think about the technology will remain same, like, what concept we have been discussing, different instrument, different technology platform, different type of assays. Those will remain same, but the clinical problem and the questions will vary depending on what you want to address, right? And while I am going to talk more about the clinical proteomics, same could be applied to any other biological problem for that matter, right? So broadly, as we have been discussing that, you first want to identify some proteins of interest or targets of interest, which you can take forward. And that's where looking at the deep proteome analysis becomes very important. And for doing that, you can do either the label-free quantification or label-based quantification. You can do data-dependent acquisition. You can also do data-independent acquisition. And then once you have identified thousands of proteins, you do a lot of analysis using the softwares from the Proteome Discoverer, MaxQuant, secondary data analysis using MetaboAnalyst, Perseus, and then you identified some proteins of interest. You can also utilize some computational tools with machine learning and find out which targets among those are the best ones, because you are looking at thousands of proteins. And finally, you want to develop a test which could be based on maybe 3 protein, 4 proteins, 5 proteins. Ideally, one protein can be the best thing, but usually one protein may not be sufficient to give you a very accurate test. So, a panel of the protein could be something what we are looking for. So let's say you have identified those panel of the protein, and now you want to validate those. That's where target proteomics workflow comes into the play. And you have been exposed to the concept of the skyline and looking at selected reaction monitoring based assays, right? So this discovery and target proteomics based platforms are the first step of, towards investigating a biological problem or clinical problem. Once you have done that, then you want to, let's say, I know the function of that given protein, or you want to understand and characterize more about that biomarker or proteins of interest, and then functional proteomics comes into the play. Then you can utilize protein microarray, surface plasma resonance, other biosensor platform, which can help you to try to give you better understanding of how this protein interacts with other proteins of interest, or how a protein can be inhibited with other drug molecules. Those kind of understanding could be obtained with the functional proteomics assays. This part I will talk in some more detail at the end of the, after your presentations will be done. So broadly, the proteomics has seen its major utility in looking for very challenging clinical problems and identifying different type of biomarkers of interest. So, for example, if anybody is infected from a given, infectious disease organism, or even the cancer or the type of disease, metabolic disorders, you first want to have some tests which can do accurately diagnosis of that particular disease. So diagnostic biomarkers are the set of protein which could be utilized to identify a disease early or very accurately. You must have heard about PSA, prostate specific antigen, which is known biomarker test for the prostate cancer, right? Like that, there are several proteins from the cancer antigen proteins, CA proteins. There are proteins for the EBNA, BRCA. Many of these genes and proteins are there, which are used for different type of cancer testing, cancer to diagnose accurately for the breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, like that, right? So, and more tests are coming forward based on these type of discovery workflows and looking at the novel molecules. And that's really important because, many times you want to have early prediction of a disease. You want to identify a disease much early. Can we even identify a disease just based on the blood-based test? Because, most of the people go for the routine health checkup when the blood is taken for the normal, blood parameters. Different type of biochemical tests are being done on that. Can we also investigate all the proteins from those, and then try to see like the panel of the protein which is important for that given disease? Can we look at their trends and their intensities and see like are there any changes which looks like abnormal, and whether we can preempt the people that, okay, you might be having issues for this particular disease. For example, female women who have history like in their own family for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, if they are going for the the blood test, if certain proteins can be tested early and try to see like is there any aberration we see in those protein trends, then these women could be taken forward for the more advanced test immediately. And in that way, at much earlier stage, you can have the accurate diagnosis and you can try to control the problem before it spreads very aggressively. There are several tests which has come forward based on this concept, and now in United States there is a FDA, Food and Drug Administration, which approves the very safe test and the drug products, and they have approved a couple of tests based on these proteomics biomarker based tests for the early detection of the disease from the blood. And that's where the the Roma test and few more tests has come forward, which is looking for the early screening of the breast cancer and ovarian cancer. This just gives you an idea where you'd like to take your proteomic technologies forward, because finally all these are instruments and gadgets, right? But they should give you some meaningful, important hits like these proteins and peptides, which can be taken forward towards diagnostic test, or it could also be towards the prognostic test. For example, you already know that you are suffering from the disease, even something as simple as dengue or malaria, right? These are reality, everybody knows about it. Everybody don't die from malaria or dengue, but there is a small subset of population which actually does suffer a lot with the severe complications. Can we make some prediction that, okay, among all the people who are infected from dengue or malaria or COVID for that matter, if a small fraction of those are high risk for the severity, can we detect that early? And if we can do that prognosis early, then probably we have better probability of giving them medications and control that disease with much more efficient way. You can always think about other type of markers which could be predictive in nature, or whether a disease might recur again. Are there some proteins which could indicate that person is going to have relapse of the cancer again, because the person was recovered after the radiotherapy and chemotherapy, but now after few years you see again the trend of some of those proteins again showing very high change in density, which might be indicative that it's going to have the recurrence of that tumor. So think about what we are looking at. We are going to try to look for some guiding molecules which could help us at different stages of the decision making for the clinicians, how best we can utilize these leads forward for understanding the disease better, early diagnosis, better prognosis, better therapeutics, and maybe indicators for the recurrence. So in this slide, I'll just give you some flavor. Of course, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but just give you some flavor that, okay, we thought investigating a problem malaria using proteomics technology. And malaria, all of you are familiar, which comes from the mosquito bite with the falciparum and vivax. These are the the causative agents. So Plasmodium falciparum is the main culprit, which has been seen from long time to cause malaria. But Plasmodium vivax over the last decade has taken over the falciparum now. And in India, most of the places now, if you see, it's mainly vivax malaria, not anymore falciparum malaria, only few cases of falciparum. Whereas when I started in back at IIT Bombay, that time primarily it was only falciparum malaria a decade back, when I joined here. And when we were meeting the clinicians from KEM Hospital and other centers in Mumbai and other places of India, it was primarily only falciparum, very few samples of vivax. Now the trend is totally reversed. You can see how much dynamic, the interplay happens in the pathogens as well, and some takes over the other pathogens, right? So this is what is a lot of epidemiological interesting observations can be made separately. But now, given that P. vivax or Plasmodium vivax is the most challenging pathogen for causative agent for malaria, but at the same time, our progress or the understanding of vivax malaria in the last 10 years has not progressed as rapidly as it should have been done. And ideally, everything is based on knowledge from the falciparum, which has been known from the several decades. So all the rapid diagnostic tests, looking at the the morphology of these pathogens in microscope, PCR, all of those were developed for the falciparum to begin with, and slowly people started incorporating other malarial pathogens, especially the vivax. So if you can do polymerase chain reaction, you have these specific primers for the genes which are for the vivax or falciparum that can accurately tell that, okay, a person is having falciparum or vivax, or it could be also the mixed infection, which happens many times. Microscopy, when you take these blood samples from these patients, and then you make the smear of that on the glass slides, then you can observe those in the microscopy, and you can, if the eyes are experienced, to look for these particles from the falciparum or vivax, then you can actually maybe make accurate detection that, okay, there is a infection happening, and what is the parasitemia or the number of parasites which can be seen in the each field, and accordingly the parasite load can be calculated. But most of the time, what you are actually looking at the rapid diagnostic test, because you don't have so much time for polymerase chain reaction, which takes much longer time for the diagnosis to happen. Microscopy requires a lot of specialized eyes and experienced eyes to look into those parts. RDTs are something which you are looking at a color change and you want to have very quick ways of telling that is the person is having falciparum malaria or vivax malaria. So most of the tests which were happening was essentially looking at certain enzymes of falciparum. And if you don't have falciparum, but you have malarial symptoms, maybe you have vivax. That kind of things were there, but not exactly you can say which other type of Plasmodium species you might have infection. Over the time, there are certain tests which has come from the LDH and the PLDH and also for the falciparum and vivax, which is more unique. But still there is a lack of very specific test for the vivax as compared to falciparum. Also, like in the falciparum research, which is happening from several decades, people are taking these parasites of Plasmodium falciparum, and they can culture that easily in the lab settings. So you can continuously culture those, and therefore you have some very good 3D7 and other culture system which can be utilized to understand this particular pathogen better. Whereas the vivax, you don't have a good continuous culture system. Even if you take the vivax parasites from the patient's blood sample and you want to culture those in your lab culture condition, it has been very challenging. And because the vivax has very less parasite density, so overall, even detection becomes challenging as well as even culturing has been quite challenging. Therefore, our understanding and research in this area has been quite limited. So that's the genesis, and I hope this is the kind of a problem which all of us see all the time. Like I'm sure right now everybody would see the dengue fever is on rise and sometimes malaria is on rise. So all these things are reality. We have to live up with these pathogens and try to understand them better and try to control them better. So we thought, can we look at a patient's blood sample, which are infected from either falciparum or vivax, right? And we had several centers from India which were part of collaborating teams. A few hospitals from Mumbai and Kolkata and Bikaner and Goa, different populations we try to screen from, individuals suffering from falciparum or vivax. So after doing all these kind of routine tests from the confirming the patients with the PCR, looking at microscopy index, and then looking at, now we are trying to look at the plasma samples. Here we can do a couple of things. We can try to extract from the blood samples first, try to extract the parasites, and then try to, extract all the parasite proteins to look at which are all parasite protein we can see from the patient sample. So we are talking about the blood taken from the patients, trying to extract the parasite which is present in the blood after infection, which is very low amount, and then try to utilize that information. In this case, after doing the parasite lysis, protein extraction, then we use the ran on the gel and did in-gel digestion of all those pieces. Again, there were many challenges of doing this project. I'm not going in detail about the saponin lysis of how to lyse these cells and why we went for the in-gel, but this is work better. And then once you run these on the mass spec, you can combine that data and then you can have an idea which all parasite proteins are present in these individuals. Or from the same patient, one could also take the plasma, and plasma may have two things. One is the human protein, which is what is expected here, which will be highly abundant host proteins. At the same time, you may also have some parasite protein, some of the falciparum or vivax protein, which is secreted in the plasma. So you may have very high abundant, but specific proteins coming from the pathogen as well. So both of those could be investigated. Now plasma has a lot of abundant proteins like albumin and immunoglobulins. So first you want to deplete those out, and therefore after doing that only you can look at the other proteins of interest. So some technical methods has to be looked into these things. Again, when you are going to make your presentations in subsequent classes, you have to pay attention to some of these parts. Okay. Of course, I'm just talking about our research, but when you will read papers from the other authors and you are going to make your presentations based on your projects, you have to look into the literature. You have to look into the methodology, how people have tried to come up with experimental plan. So here from the same sample, we are trying to investigate three things. One is parasite proteins from the blood. Second is the parasite protein which has been secreted in the plasma sample, which will be very few. And third is the human proteins or the host proteins. And for doing so, you have a very different extraction strategy here. You have very different extraction strategy here. So again, looking at the experimental methods, the kind of methodology being used, why they have chosen that, all that should be the part of your critical analysis for your presentations as well. So just to cut short, when we looked at, our goal was to find out, can we look at some new candidates or novel specific peptides and proteins for only Vivax malaria, which has not been seen in the falciparum malaria, because those could be taken forward as the way to make the new diagnostic test, which is very specific for as the RDTs for the Vivax malaria. So again, we looked at entire parasite proteome, as I just briefly mentioned in the previous slide. We could also see certain proteins from the parasite which are secreted in the plasma, and these could be very valuable protein because most of the time the blood tests are based on the plasma or serum, and if there are some parasite protein which are secreted in the plasma, like especially like you can see lactodehydrogenase, aldolase, some of these protein also we see. Additionally, we could also see some other protein which were not reported earlier. And then we found that from the parasite extract, we could find some very interesting and novel candidates. And we looked at their sequences. Some of them are unknown proteins, like with the putative sequences. But these are very unique only for the Plasmodium vivax, not for the falciparum. So after doing the sequence alignment with the falciparum vivax, other malarial pathogen and host, all of that, we could see that these are the unique peptides coming from the unique proteins, in fact, peptides mapping to the proteins, which is very unique for Vivax. So again, some of these can be very good novel candidates for the next generation diagnostic kits to be developed for Vivax malaria. Additionally, we also utilized our other technology platforms like protein microarrays, and this was the work was done on the Goa population, where we try to look at, can we do this type of testing for screening the population? Like, many times we see in a lot of slum areas and other places, a huge number of population is being infected. So can we look at the population-based survey for the antibody breadth, for which is infected from the falciparum or the Vivax? What is the distribution in the age-wise manner? How they are different from the non-severe and severe complications? All of these were tested out using protein arrays. Also, as I said, not only diagnostic, but understanding the disease severity becomes important. And so idea was, can we look at the using proteomics and metabolomics, how the non-severe Vivax malaria patients, when they progress to the severe disease, what kind of proteins are changing over there? And after many analysis, few proteins, which include some of the acute phase protein like serum amyloid A protein here in this case, the notations are healthy control, non-severe Vivax and severe Vivax. You can see the serum amyloid A protein is going very high as the disease is progressing from the healthy to non-severe to the severe form. Whereas other protein like haptoglobin, it is showing you the downward trend, like it's normal level is like this, but in the non-severe it's going down, and in the severe going further down. Also, as the disease getting progressed, lot of protein which are involved in the cytoskeletal regulation, like titin, vitronectin, even they showed higher upregulation as the disease get progressed. We could also see like there are a set of metabolites which are showing a lot of change as the disease progressing from the healthy control to the non-severe to the severe form. And some of these amino acid based metabolites are actually quite known in the malaria biology as well. So what I'm trying to give you a flavor, that even if you are investigating a problem totally out of the box, totally from scratch, using these technologies, very quickly you can get some very novel insight that what is happening as the disease gets progressed, and what could be good candidates which can be used for the diagnosis of the disease. All that which I talked to you was about the Vivax malaria, and very first time we showed understanding of this Vivax malaria much better way, which was not known earlier. And first time we showed pathways that how oxidative stress pathway, level of cytoskeletal protein, all those are giving further rise to the severe form of the Vivax malaria. Again, I'm not going into the great detail about how this entire pathway works, but you can understand that using these small bits and pieces of information, then finally, like in that kind of puzzle, you would like to put that forward, use literature information, use different type of reactome and KAG and other type of pathway builders, and try to come up with these kind of pathways from the unknown problems. Now you bring it some visual ways of depicting how that problem occurs and what is the possible understanding or our hypothesis towards the disease severity in this case. Now, while we are doing this kind of work, we also thought to investigate the severe falciparum complication, because while falciparum is known, but there are different type of complication happens with the severe falciparum, and knowing the marker, which kind of marker could be unique for cerebral malaria, which happens with the brain, or with the severe anemia condition or other type of complications of falciparum, that is still not very clear, not much known. So we thought to utilize our these samples and proteomics knowledge to investigate these problems. And what you have here, healthy control. We then also have the severe anemia, we have non-severe falciparum, we have the group for the cerebral malaria, we have all other type of severe complications. So, and then we also looked at the respective control groups, because if you're comparing the cerebral malaria and you are comparing them with healthy control, that may not be the ideal control. So we try to look at the control from the meningitis patients. Those sample can be ideal control for the cerebral malaria. Likewise, when we are looking at the severe anemia, the person who are anemic already but not with because of the malaria, they could be better control for the investigating the severe anemia problem caused because of the malaria. So think about choosing the right control becomes very important in the clinical problems or biological problem, because if you are only looking at protein chain and you want to compare healthy control with everything else, you will see day and night difference, but that may not be true reflection of the unique changes which is happening just because of that disease or that pathogen. Therefore, it becomes very important for you to also critically look at when you will be doing your project, that for doing that type of analysis, what should be the right controls to be used, and what other investigators, other authors have reported for that disease, what could be my positive controls and negative controls. So all those should be important way to move forward in investigating these problems. Based on these investigation, we could even come up with few new diagnostic biomarker candidate for the falciparum malaria. Although falciparum diagnosis is much more robust, currently it's more done with the HRP protein, histidine rich protein, but there are some mutation being reported in PFHRP2. Therefore, still there is a need to look at some new candidates, and we could find some novel candidates like serine repeat antigens, which looks very unique to the falciparum, and we are actually taking these candidates forward. So where we are on this project, in addition to enhancing a lot of knowledge for the new understanding of the disease, how the disease progresses in vivax malaria from the non-severe to severe form, and the different type of severe complications of falciparum malaria, we have also tried to come up with, can we come up with, based on these protein signatures, a kit which can be utilized to look at two things. One is that how to distinguish vivax with falciparum malaria, and second is, can that also indicate if a disease is going to get progress from the mild to the severe form. So if a chip consists of few proteins from the host response, like serum amyloid A protein and haptoglobin proteins, which indicates up and down level, indicates that the disease is going to get further progressed to the severe form. And very unique candidate which I showed you for vivax or falciparum, if all of them are on the same chip, with the same you can do diagnosis and indication for the further prognosis. And while doing so, a lot of things goes on in the research world. We have to look at each protein across all the complications, their levels, like what I'm showing you here, from the falciparum malaria to vivax malaria to dengue fever to different type of non-severe and severe complications. All of that has to be seen, different type of SRM based test has to be done. All of that only leads us to some confidence at which target to take forward, where then industry puts a lot of money, government puts a lot of money, and then we are working on some of the very big projects right now with these industries and government to come up with these type of final tests and the kits. So overall, looking at just one problem which I tried to illustrate you today about malaria and investigating with proteomics, you can see these proteomic technologies are so powerful that when we started investigating the malaria in Indian patients, there was not much work done in that space and not much knowledge available actually. And a lot of novel insight we could obtain looking at new diagnostic biomarkers, looking at how disease get progressed, also looking at the immune response from the population screening, as well as the unique signatures of different complications in different type of severe falciparum or severe vivax malaria. So many of these information could be obtained in rather short time using these technologies, and that's where you can see the power of these big data sets and how to utilize these technologies to address some of the meaningful problems of interest. So I'm stopping here. We have several papers published in this area. I will be happy to put forward some of those for your further reading if you're interested. But idea for talking about all this is that now in the first part of the course prior to mid-sem, you have been exposed to many proteomics concept and lot of data analysis workflows. Finally, you want to see this kind of applications, like how all of that knowledge and all the analysis and software can actually try to be utilized for meaningful problems and how they can give us some novel insight to investigate these problems of interest. So let me now talk to you briefly about our plan for the next set of activities post midsem. So you might have seen the sheets by now. We have been discussing with you over the emails and various sheets have been shared to you that a group of students have been assigned the projects which are linked to clinical or biological oriented. Other set of students which comes from more computer science and other computational background projects linked to the computational analysis and more AI ML type of approaches have been assigned. So broadly, two different type of projects have been assigned to all the students, around 45 people who are actively participating in the course. So just to make it very clear, because timing will be short, today and the next class, both of these classes, we are going to work with you and help you to do the data analysis for your projects. So let's say we have already given the schedule for the presentation as well. That was purely based on your names and the alphabet which we have chosen. So and then initially we are going with the biology projects, and then second we will be moving towards the computational projects. So in this slide, 5 of these students, please start getting ready more actively. Of course, everybody has to be ready. You are due on 29 September. So the topics have been assigned to you as per your preferences given. And the data set link is also given in the Google Sheet. It means you can go and download those data files, which you can start analyzing. So today what you will do, all of you, you will go to these links in the Excel sheet, download the data file, which if you are, I'm sure you have done by now. If not, you can do that now. And then we are going to make 2 teams room shortly. The biology project students will be in room 1. So this is the schedule is going to progress in different classes. And then the computational students are going to be in the room 2. So right now we will have 2 teams group, 2 TAs in one room, other 2 TAs will be in another room to now walk you through the computational workflows or the data analysis workflow. You will be doing, everybody will be doing their own data analysis. We are there to help you out, to discuss and talk to you that if you face any problem in analysis, how best we can try to make it better for you or give you better workflows for that. So this is more interactive. It's not going to be an exam right now. It is essentially to help you do better project analysis. Please don't look this sheet as a final thing. The Excel sheet will be final sheet, where the schedules are being updated. But finally, what is going to happen that each one of you have been assigned one unique topic. And we'll be very happy to learn from each one of you how you took the data and you move forward with that analysis, right? So what we are going to look at, every student is free to utilize whatever best way you think you can analyze your data. We are not going to restrict you in that way. We have given you some software and analysis workflow from beginning till now, but you are free to utilize anything else as well, whatever you think you can do the good analysis of this data. So in some way you are doing a mini project independently, and once you will do analysis and you will find some proteins of interest or pathways of interest, then you can look at literature to see like what literature talks about these disease problem. Like there are some problem statement or the data is for the, let's say, COVID. Some problems are for the colorectal cancer, something is for malaria. You will go to some of those papers and see what you are identifying versus what is known in literature. Does that make some sense? And can you make better biological understanding and interpretation from those literature review as well? For your presentation, you will have 15 minutes time and 3 minutes we will keep for Q&A. It's going to be 20 marks for your presentations. Now, given the large number of students, we are squeezing in, and we can keep 5 presenters every class. Still, it will be only 15 minutes we can have for presentation and 3 minutes for Q&A. So 5 presenters every class. And given that many times we do see all the problems of network connectivity and issues, what we are going to do that you are going to record your presentations in Zoom, where you should be visible during the presentation. We can maybe give you some more format and detail. And then please make sure that you adhere to the time. If you exceed the time, you will be penalized with the negative marking. Maximum 15 minutes. Don't make it short either. So around 14 to 15 minutes length of the presentation, and you have to upload those video in a Google Drive link 1 day prior to your presentation. So for example, if students who are the first batch due on 29 September, you should record your presentation till 28 September. Now keep in mind that personally, I am going to be there throughout, available to each one of you, even online and in ways of email or whatever way you want me to give you further insight or mentorship to help you out understand that problem better, or to give you a better idea for your presentation. Of course, presentation you have to make, and then you are going to be evaluated based on the presentation. But to help you make effective presentations, myself and the TL are going to be there to help you out in doing that. Now what we'll be doing, all these 5 presentations will be uploaded as a part of that lecture content in that video in the Zoom, in the actually the Teams link, followed by in the YouTube. And then we are going to share you one link, which will be Google Form link, where you will going to write a short summary from that presentation. So it means the whole class has to be attentive. Of course, it's going to be mandatory to present in the class, and whole class is going to watch those presentation and ask some questions, but also you have to write briefly the summary of the presentation, what you learned from that presentation. So that will happen as a part of the write-up, which will also give you marks, but that will happen not in the class time. We will give you a link. You can do that at any time, just prior to the next class. You have to finish that off. So these are some of the guidelines. I hope that helps you understand how we are going to get progress in this particular module now. So several presentations are going to be lined up in the classes. And after that, then I will come back and talk to you more about some of the functional proteomics technology, especially protein microarrays, surface plasmon resonance, other type of label-free biosensors, and how other omic technologies have led to the more of the revolutions in the area, and a lot of novel insight and products have come forward. So those will be towards the end part of the lectures. So this is what the plan is. Regarding the mid-sem, let me first congratulate some of the students who have done really well and performed and obtained very good marks. Some of you did not do so well, but I'm sure that you have still opportunity to catch up and perform well, because we are doing the continuous evaluation throughout the course. The CRIF we have not seen much. Some students have only asked few questions, which we'll try to address by Friday. And if there's still any problem, we'll be happy to talk to you further. So that's all right now from my side. I just thought to give you idea that how proteomics, not only just talking about technical proteomics, about the instruments and the softwares, but proteomics finally has to reveal the biology and the other interesting applications. And that's what we are going to do that. And what you'll be really happy in the coming weeks to see that all you are starting with a blank Excel sheet, which has some numbers and some data information. And each one of you are independently going to develop those, very abstract information to make it look something very dynamic and biology oriented and clinical oriented, or even some sort of predictive oriented as you go along in the course. And you will see a lot of interesting insights will come forward from these just numbers from the Excel sheet, right? And that will be the fun part of this course, where we'll also feel excited that many students can now do the project and bring the valuable information to bring the new biological and the clinical and the machine learning approaches from that data set. So that's all right now. If you have any questions, please feel free to call, ask me right now. We can talk. If you have any query regarding the presentations, that also we can discuss right now. And simultaneously, I request Shashwati to share the 2 team links in the chat here, because after this we are going to make 2 different groups. Students from the biology projects will be in the room 1, and students from the computational will be in the room 2. In room 1, we will have Shashwati and Abhilash with you. In room 2, you will have Avinash and Deep with you. All of these are excellent PhD students of IIT Bombay. Shashwati works on breast cancer, Abhilash works on colorectal cancer, Deep works on meningioma, brain tumors, and Avinash works on oral cancer. So I hope you understand that these are all people who are researchers working on different type of very challenging cancer and clinical problems. And they are applying different biology and computational approaches to understand these problems better. So they'll be in good position to help you to take your data forward, analysis forward. All right, any questions before I close this and we move to respective teams? Please raise your hand. Dhanush, Devanshi.
Hello, sir. Hello,
Yes.
sir. I had a doubt on the project topic which is assigned to me. I had selected a clinical or biological background topic, but it says, for me, it says deep proteomics. So isn't it a computational background?
Deep proteomics
Of oral cancer versus control.
See, I think deep proteome, as you can understand, means you are trying to look for all the proteins from the that given sample type, right?
Yes,
So, so the very first thing for all of these projects will be actually deep proteome analysis, right? Because we do want to see maximum number of protein coming from that disease sample, and then you want to apply that with the quantitative approaches, right? So you can take some of these specific queries in the smaller group as we will talk. But the workflow will remain same. I don't see that will have any problem for you. You would like to make sure that using different workflows, you are looking at maximum number of protein to begin with, and then perform quantitative approaches and do more type of investigation to understand that disease better. But we can definitely look at your project topic in much more clarity and talk to you in the separate room shortly in the room 1.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right, anybody else? By the way, Aparna, you did very well. Congratulations for the mid-sem. And any other student have any questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
For the very interesting
Yes.
set of topics that you have assigned. I wanted to know what is the basic difference between global and deep proteomics, because I've seen some projects are labeled with the title of deep proteomics.
Right.
Like I
See, I think yeah, so in some way global and deep are going to infer same information, but global is essentially looking at all the proteins from a given system. Deep is also looking at novel ways of analyzing low abundant to high abundant kind of proteins. But ideally all of that lead to the global. So in the words can be interchangeable in some way, but not for, because right now whatever you have the data already given, right? So you don't have much possibility for doing anything else. But if you were to do this project in the lab, then this word can have different meaning. For example, if Dhanush is doing deep proteomics and Aparna is doing global proteomics, now the difference over there will be Dhanush is going to try out 5 different extraction methods from that oral cancer tissue, and he is going to try out, looking at the how best I can get maximum coverage of my entire proteome. Even if I'm trying trizol method, I'm trying TC acetone method, I'm trying urea lysis method. Each method is going to give me a lot of common protein, but several methods are going to give me some unique protein as well. So he's going to spend a lot of his time into trying to get if the predicted number of genes from that particular tissue is going to be 5,000, for example. Using his different extraction methodology, he's going to try to reach that 5,000 for the deep coverage, because he would like to get the maximum coverage from that sample type. So therefore, extraction methods and the strategies become very important over there. You would like to try every single thing, and then you'd like to fractionate it very well. You would like to run every sample for maybe 2 or 3 hours long gradients. You'd like to make multiple type of fractionation from the liquid IEF isoelectric focusing based methods or within the chromatographic based separations. You'd like to make 6 fractions, 10 fractions, each one of those being run separately and long gradient. So that is going to give you the deep proteome. Again, global is the deep data is also going to lead you to the global proteome, but global proteome does not always infer that you have looked for every single possible protein from that sample type. Even if you just started with your tissue sample and you have done the lysis with the urea lysis method and you got sizable number of protein, let's say 5,000 was target, but you got 2,500 or 3,000, that is still going to be towards the global proteome analysis. You are not very keen into deep proteome to really push for every single protein from that sample type. I hope that clarifies the slight change which is there in these terms, deep and versus global. As I said, right now you don't have much room because you cannot be in the lab to do these further extraction methods or generate more data in that way. So you can definitely clarify with your respective mentors in the group shortly. But if you were to do this project, then this words will have slightly different value and much more effort to be taken for the deep proteome as compared to just looking at global proteome analysis. I hope that clarifies for the conceptual part, but your question still remains valid with the data set given, what all to be done from that, and that's what we would like to talk to you in the respective groups right now. Anybody else has any question or any comments here? Okay, so to save the time, I think we will quickly now move to the respective groups, and we do want you to do your projects along with in this time, so that finally you have to make sure that you are making good progress along with the class time and with the class as you are progressing, so that you don't have to spend too much time separately over the weekend or in the evening or night just for doing this project. So we would like to utilize this thing along with us in today's class and in the subsequent tomorrow's the Friday class as well, where again we'll be there to help you out to do this project. Please feel free to utilize that time to talk to us and discuss that whatever things are unclear to you. And most of the project you should be able to do that in that time. Of course, you will still need to spend some time to understand literature and know about those proteins, which you can do separately as well. That's all from my side right now. So thank you, everyone. We are now going to join two separate groups, and we will see you shortly over there in the respective groups. So I'm going to close this particular Teams link, and we'll be meeting you on two separate links over there. Okay, thank you.